Welcome to another episode of WTQ Talks. For the next 90 days, we'll be focusing on different areas of mental well-being in the lead up to Mental Health Month in October. So I'd like to introduce you to Tahnee Clark, the Chief Operating Officer and Clinical Lead at Lysn, and she's also a practicing psychologist. Hi Tahnee, could you share with us a little bit more about the mission of Lysn?
Yeah, absolutely, Stacey. So our mission is to be the leader of mental health. We're a digital mental health company, and we help people find their best fit psychologist.
Wow, excellent. That sounds really interesting. So today I believe that we are going to be talking about the cycle of grief and the three-quarter time phenomenon, which I have to say I'm not familiar with. So Tahnee, I'll let you take it away.
Wonderful. Thank you, Stacey. So I guess I wanted to share a little bit about grief because it's a very timely topic at the moment. All of us to some degree are experiencing grief with what we're going through with COVID. We're experiencing grief around the loss of our freedom, having a predictable future, loss of wonderful plans that we had, whether it's to see a friend's baby or to travel with our family. We also have the loss of a particular role in being a good grandparent or being a good friend or being a good auntie in this time. And we're all doing this for the greater good to overcome COVID. And so during this time, there's a lot of fear and there's a lot of confusion. But by talking about this topic, I hope that I can give a little bit of structure and predictability in what are the universal 5 stages of grief. And while I say that, that doesn't mean that you're going to go through these in a succinct way. We all experience grief slightly differently. Some people will enter this cycle of grief at different times, will go through one period longer than another, or might repeat a particular stage back and forth before they get to a point of acceptance. So today, I'm very fortunate to share a little bit with you around the stages of grief and then this incredible phenomenon called three-quarter time, which I think will resonate with a lot of people. So with these stages, the first one is around denial, and denial essentially is that rejection that something is happening or has happened to us. And denial is actually a much needed survival skill. It's something that is predatory inside us, and we need that ability to deny things in order to have a fighting chance of survival. It gives us enough energy to be able to have some self-preservation. We all need a little bit of that in the moment, and so kind of put on hold the emotional or physical pain that we would experience by fully understanding the depth of what we're going through. But in a state of COVID, we might find that people during denial might say things like, this is all overblown. It's the same as the flu. It's no big deal. The media's going crazy. Then there's a stage called bargaining, and for other people, they might call it bartering. And during this time, this is when the denial starts to break away a little bit. We begin to kind of acknowledge the reality of what's going on, and we're trying to grip on with dear life at anything we can to try to gain a sense of control. And so that might be even bartering with God, or bartering with the higher power, or just bartering in our own mind. You're trying to find a way that we can even justify our own behaviour. So that might be, please God, make this go away, or, please God, I don't deserve this. This needs to end quickly. Or when justifying our own behaviour, it might be, as long as I wash my hands, and I'm fighting fit, I'll be fine to see my friends. Then we go through a stage called anger, and in anger, anger is quite a powerful emotion, so it feels quite empowering when we're in. And our emotions during this time, represent really good values of ours that have been insulted. So anger is not necessarily a bad thing to have, while it can feel very powerful. And this might be because the anger that our freedom has been taken away from us. And so during this time, though, we might not focus on actually what we can do about the situation. We're more focusing on blaming others. This is not my fault. This shouldn't have happened to us. This is somebody else's problem to fix, for example. And then we would move into a stage of despair. And as I said, this might not happen in this kind of unique format. You might go back and forth from different stages. But in a state of despair, there's a sense of depression that happens that starts to set in. And I think all of us have felt a little bit of that heaviness in times. And this is when it really starts to truly affect us. We can get a sense of helplessness and hopelessness about it. And it might be because we just can't see an end in sight. And it's really disempowering, very different to that anger feeling. And we might realise that our attempts at bargaining didn't really work. And there's a real heaviness or a kind of a sense of self-pity that comes with that. And we might think things like, I can't work, I can't earn any money, you know, I'll never come back from this. This is the end of me. And then there's this stage of acceptance, which is far more liberating. And during a stage of acceptance, this is when we finally acknowledge and surrender to the fact of what has happened. But similarly, we also start to deal with the actual, with our feelings. We start to kind of effectively try to find ways to get around this or go about how life is going to be during this time. And people in this stage might say things like, well, I can't control the pandemic. It's going to happen. I can't go over it. I can't go under it. I just have to go through it and do the best I can to do my part and look after myself. And so, as I said before, you know, through these stages is that they're universally recognised. And I hope that while I can't take anything away from you by you going through these stages, it does allow a little bit of predictability for you in a very unpredictable time.
So before we move on to 3/4, I just wanted to ask, so it's quite normal for people to move between these stages in and out, and you could keep going around that circle, or it's not necessarily linear, right?
Absolutely. And particularly at the moment, because the times are so unprecedented, we're not going through just one wave. There's two waves. There's, you know, people are going through it in different ways. That really starts to then, you might start to have an acceptance and then almost go back into denial. No, this can't happen again. Like, we were over this. Remember, I bargained with God, and things are better. Yeah, this can't happen again. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you for explaining that.
Wonderful. And so I thought it might be worthwhile me sharing this other piece of information around the 3/4 time. That'd be good.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so there's this incredible phenomenon called the 3/4 time, and it's come from research into pretty hardcore circumstances of isolation and confinement. And a lot of this is actually with astronauts and people who are living in Antarctica doing study there that are very, very isolated and in very unusual circumstances. And so what they found that there's a particular time point, like where we hit our threshold when things really start to get really hard for us, when we've been cooped up inside. And so this is that phenomenon called 3/4 time. And I guess in line with what it's called, it's when we're 3/4 through a difficult period of time. And that's when we find a real decline in our mental health. So I first learned about this phenomena listening to a clinical psychologist who assesses the mental health of Australians in Antarctica, and her name is Dr. Kimberly Norris, and she studies from the University of Tasmania. And through the research that's been found in isolation, and this, as I said before, through submarines, space stations, polar bunkers, so pretty hardcore circumstances similar to a pandemic, that there's a lot that we can learn from this that is can be applied to COVID, and there's a huge amount of parallels that we're actually finding in what people are reporting with COVID at the moment. So to give a little bit of backstory, it was back in the 1980s that they found that they were trying to work out how long humans could actually survive in space. And while they were doing this study, they were looking at how long they can endure radiation and zero gravity. But what they actually found was the most difficult thing for human beings is not having connection. It's and experiencing interpersonal conflict by isolation. And violence rates are up. Relationship breakdowns are up. Just mental health distress is up because of this isolation. And so typically our mood and morale hits this lowest point when we're kind of going into the half time, and then really kind of getting pretty hardcore around the 2/3 marks of what's going on. And so I guess when we lay out how these stages work, the research has shown that initially there's kind of a heightened sense of anxiety, which parallels very much with what we found with people buying toilet paper and really stacking up on goods. Then there's a second stage of kind of settling down to a routine, but then that creating marked depression. And that's also what we found, people saying, I'm suddenly going to learn pottery and I'm going to hire a pottery wheel, or I'm going to become the world's best baker, or I'm going to learn Spanish. But then there was this kind of like heaviness that happened. And that's when then this kind of 3/4 time really kicked in. with a lot of anticipation. People found that they were having emotional outbursts. They might be feeling aggressive. They get rowdy. And this is, a time, I guess, people would, had downloaded House Party, but now they're abandoning that application.
I'm definitely guilty of that one.
I downloaded it too. maybe I'm projecting here. So that's what we found, is that it's the really tough time. And so that research that they found, back in 1980s, it's still, even with the Antarctic research that they found recently, it's shown that this phenomenon is very relevant today. And some of the biggest part of that is around the feeling of loneliness and also kind of clickiness, that people have kind of gotten to these little clicky groups, and they don't feel like it's part of it. We start to kind of feel paranoid that all of our friends have got a group chat and we're not invited. So it can be a really, really tough time. But I guess I wanted to end this with knowing that there's some really good news. Despite the 3/4 time phenomenon happening, what they've actually found is that nearly 100% of astronauts that go through this complete isolation and difficulty, they always decide, to go back, to continue to be an astronaut and to find these incredible times.
So it's like human resilience, like humans are naturally resilient. Even though we're going through these really tough times of isolation and uncertainty and anxiety, we're still prepared to put ourselves through it again.
Yeah, absolutely. We are phenomenal. Human adaptability is incredible. And one of the biggest things that actually comes from it is actually that when we're in a state of real difficulty, wonderful things happen. Through war, there's baby boomers,
Yes.
It's that fight, flight, feed or fornicate. And so, that's another thing that happens, is that we actually, in these times, we actually learn more about our personal values. We learn about what's important to us, what's important in life. People actually seem to become clearer on what's important to them, and they actually build better relationships after a period like this. And a last thing I wanted to say that's also really interesting is that the researchers found quite different positive changes that happen between men and women after isolation. So men are actually more likely to use social supports as a coping strategy more after they've been isolated for a period of time. And women actually have an increased trust in their own ability. So essentially that means men become less insular and women become more confident after isolation, which is really cool.
That is very interesting. So men literally are from Mars and women are from Venus. Keep talking about the space theme that we've been discussing.
Yeah, and I mean, and there's probably so much more. I know that that's such a simple finding, but it's interesting in its own right. But so I thought it'd be worth to add.
No, absolutely. In fact, this whole talk has been incredibly interesting. I want to thank you for deep diving into some of these subjects today. I understand that we're going to be posting a little bit more information about the 3/4 time phenomenon and around just the general cycle of grief. So you'll be able to find those links on Instagram, LinkedIn, and also on the Lysn website. So I want to thank you, Tahnee, for your time. And I believe they can get in touch with you at Lysn as well if people are struggling with the topics you've discussed today.
Yeah, absolutely. We're here from, if you're struggling or you have found your personal values and you want to refine them, that we can, meet you across that whole spectrum. And we're at www.welysn, which is spelled a little bit differently. It's we, W-E, as in we, and then listen, but LYSN.com. And we can help you find your best fit psychologist. Thank you.
Perfect, that's great. And yet we've put our names on the side here on the invitation bar, so you can see how also WellTech is also slightly different. It's WELLTEQ. But we'll make sure that on all the posts we've got links back to the websites and some of the more information and other articles that both Tahnee and her colleagues have posted. And we look forward to seeing you again on another WellTech Talks. Thank you again.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.